Welcome to a brand new season of Measure Twice, Cut Once. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you might notice something a little different this season. Over the episodes, I've shared so many incredible stories from crafters who've poured their hearts and souls into their quilting journeys. And those conversations have been magical, hearing about the challenges, the breakthroughs, and the pure joy of creating something beautiful with our own hands. But this season, I'm taking a slightly different path. I want to dive a little deeper into the behind the scenes of not just quilting, but building a creative business that truly lights you up. As someone who's navigated the exciting and sometimes bumpy world of turning a passion into a profession, I'm excited to pull back the curtain and share my own experiences. Some episodes will be just me, diving deep into my personal journey, while others will feature guests who are also navigating the world of creative entrepreneurship. We'll explore the nitty-gritty of building a creative business, with its lessons learned and the unexpected challenges that come with transforming your craft into a thriving enterprise. And don't worry, I'm not leaving storytelling behind. Instead, I'll be weaving them into the conversations about what it takes to grow a business while staying true to your creative spirit. So whether you're dreaming of starting your own business or you just love hearing about creative entrepreneurship, this season is for you. Casey Brown is a pricing geek, author of the new book, Fearless Pricing, and professional speaker with a passion to help leaders, entrepreneurs, and sellers command the prices they deserve. She's helped over 1,000 companies generate over $1 billion in incremental profits. In her signature keynote, Casey demystifies customer tactics and arms audiences with practical, ready-to-implement steps to negotiate fearlessly, price confidently, and her TED Talk has been viewed nearly 4 million times. She's the founder of Boost Pricing, where she leads a team of experts who help companies discover their true pricing power and sell at higher prices and watch their profits rise as a result. So Casey, welcome into the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
This is so great. Casey and I met in person. We're in the same pod of a coaching workshop. And as soon as I heard you talking about what you do, of course, my ears perked right up, because in the field where I am with artisanal work and creatives, pricing is a big issue. We don't know how to do that well. So, of course, I wanted to pick your brain. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, just tell me something that's new and exciting on your horizon right now.
Great question. You mentioned in your introduction of me, the book, but that's just launched. So it's only been in print for a couple of weeks. And so that's still really new and exciting for me to be sharing about the book. And it's important to me because I have a mission around pricing. For me, pricing is about helping people who are excellent at what they do and pour themselves into an extraordinary outcome and a high quality product and a world-class customer experience. Seeing those folks go under rewarded by accepting mediocre pay for excellent work really fires me up. And so I'm on this one woman mission to eradicate underpricing that's rooted in fear, which is the reason most underpricing happens. And I can't be everywhere at once. And so the book, I think, is part of that mission to really get the word out, not only that you deserve to be paid for your excellence, but how to do it and the confidence to match so that you can actually command the prices you deserve.
And that, of course, is key. For many of us, that's a pipe dream to get paid what we feel like we're worth, because conveying that is the difficulty. Is this your first book, Casey?
It is. Yeah. It's been about 80% written in my head for a decade. And I finally got serious about putting some words on paper. And it was a bit of a process, of course, but I learned a lot. I'm excited about the next book. So I'm already starting to write that one in my head, which is about how to do price increases in a way that is palatable for the seller and the buyer. The buyer is who we spend all the time worrying about, that they're going to get upset or complain or shop somewhere else if our prices are too high. But usually the biggest obstacles to price increases are the seller.
I think you're right. And it's something that I'm a little bit passionate about in my field too. So long arm quilting is my thing. So I'm offering a service then that is not a necessity, right? So it's so
Sure.
easy to fall into the trap of like, how can I really show what my value is? So maybe we should probably start a little earlier. What I want to ask you is, how does this apply to artisans, to people in the type of work
Yes.
that I do? But I want to know a
Yes.
little bit more about, what is a pricing consultant? Like, what are the steps you take when you're when you see someone who's undervaluing themselves, what should they do first and then next? And how do they work through that process?
Great. Let's start with the first question. When you said, do you want to be on this podcast? I said yes. And then I think maybe from the outside, somebody who doesn't know you as well, and me as well, might think, why would a pricing person be on a quilting podcast? But there is so much richness in this topic for creatives and for people who sell their craft. And I've got actually, if anybody, I could send some stuff if you do show notes, but if
I
anybody
do.
who's listening would like some of these resources, I've got some videos and blogs I've written specifically for creatives and what I would call people who, so like nobody, my guess is that nobody listening to this podcast who is interested in what you have to share and teach, decided to hang out their shingle as a quilter and selling their wares because they love selling conversations and they love
Right.
negotiating with customers and they love spending time in spreadsheets figuring out the numbers. That isn't what drew them to this work. And that's where quilters have something in common with marketers or photographers or video production experts. These are people that have craftsmanship and expertise, right? They're masters in something very personal that they're very passionate about. And so this means that you're necessarily in kind of a seller doer role. But for a lot of people in that role, the seller side of the job is the necessary evil. It's the
Yes.
part they dread.
Agreed.
It's the part that they hate. It's the part they fear. They're most uncomfortable with it. And so they will go to the ends of the earth to get better at their craft. They're not spending as much time or effort or even a fraction of it, frankly, on how do we make sure that we're investing in our ability to get paid for that excellence that we pour into our craft.
Agreed.
The other thing, and there's a whole bunch, I could talk for a whole hour about mindset limiters of creatives. I'll try to contain myself, but I'll just mention one more. There's this challenge that if you sell a widget, anything, I don't know, I'm sitting here holding a pen, right? If you're a pen salesperson, you can talk about the quality of the pen and the attributes of the pen. And if somebody says no to you, it's okay. They don't want the pen, right? But if you're selling your own artistry, when somebody says no to you, it can feel like they're saying no to you. Like
Yes, it does.
it's a personal rejection.
Because so much of
It can be
us is in the
very
thing
hard.
that we're doing.
That's right. That's right. And it
Yeah.
can feel like a repudiation of your skill, your talent, your worth, your value. And that is maybe the starting point of the answer to your second question is what do we do? Is it's really important to unwind the stories we tell ourselves about customer interactions around pricing. In other words, my guess is everybody listening to this, it has done some version of they're walking down the street, they see a garage sale, there's a beautiful rocking chair there that they know would be perfect in the den. It's marked at $20. You think, oh my gosh, steal, I would pay 50. But then you say, would you take 15? Human beings are wired to hold on to resources and save money. And so we've learned over our history of a species how to negotiate to hold on to what we already have to keep as much of that as possible and then get this thing we want. And if we understand that and we remember what it's like to be a buyer when we sell, then it starts to allow us to decouple the feeling we have when somebody says, oh my gosh, and I don't know what the number should be, 200, 2,000, 20,000, 20 million, it doesn't matter. $200. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I wouldn't pay more than 100. And when we hear something like what starts to happen in our confidence is you're not worth that. And what it really is just a customer doing what customers do, humans doing what humans do, which is trying to hang on to their dollars. And so separating tactics from truth is a really important first step.
That's incredible. And you're absolutely right. We are so bound up in what we do and in fact, loving what we do. And in many ways, it feels like creatives are often very generous people too. And we want to do the best possible thing, and yet we don't know how to attach a value to that. So where do we
Yeah.
start then if we want to figure out, you mentioned spreadsheets, but there's probably less robust ways of valuing your time. But like, where do you start in saying and attaching a value to something that is intangible, like your time or like even your skill as an artisan? Like, how do you quantify that? You don't have a degree to
Creativity.
hang on the wall or anything.
Sure. So I have an unsatisfying answer because it's not terribly
It
precise. I'm sure
depends.
folks are like, yes, I'm a consultant. So of course I say it depends. No, I would love to be able to say to everyone listening in, do this, take these 3 steps, do this quick little math, and boom, out pops the perfect price. But it doesn't really work like that, particularly in the world of subjectivity, which all art and creative expression exists in this world of subjective value. So I would encourage, but that said, I don't want to just say, oh, too bad. It depends. It's too hard to figure out. So good luck. What am I doing on this podcast if I can't bring some useful, helpful ways to think about it? So first step is really thinking about two different price points. One is the ceiling and one is the floor. So if we start at the floor, I would say everyone should know this number, even if you don't intend to ever charge it. What is the least that you should have somebody say yes to you and you should say yes to them and still be okay?
So
So
by
maybe
be
it's
okay, do you mean feel okay about it? Or do you mean, do you know what your costs are and you're like breaking even at that point? Is that be okay?
yes. So
Okay.
it's both of those things
Okay.
depending on where your floor is. And so at the very minimum, it has to cover your hard costs and some modest measure of your time. So if you may say, and I'm an expert in this, and I've made mistakes before where I've ended up doing work that turned out to come back to minimum wage. And I'm like, how did I do this to myself? I'm an expert in it. But at least say, okay, if I'm going to pay myself, quote unquote, at least X, and
At
let's say
least
we're
McDonald's
setting a
wages.
floor, so it would be modest, at least X per hour, and it takes me this many hours, and I have this much of material, and I know that I want to have some measure of wear and tear on my machine and
Yeah.
equipment and electricity. So I'm going to build in a making this up. Yeah. $3 an hour for that. And so you, even if you're guessing, try to get your arms around your costs at a modest rate for your time and say that is the absolute floor.
Yeah.
I'm never ever saying yes to selling anything below that. I'm
And
not
that
doing it.
right there is already a breakthrough because we creatives tend to not even think that way when someone asks us, can you do this? We just think,
That's right.
oh, what a worthy
What
project.
a
Of
cool
course I'll do
project.
that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't even
Well,
stop to think if I have a floor and if this is below my floor, if it's away down there in the basement, I just can't say yes. So I have to find a gracious exit. We don't even
that's right.
stop for a second to think that.
Think that through, to do that math in our head or to
Yeah.
at least have some. And so that's step one. And if that's a breakthrough for folks listening, start there.
Yeah.
Just start to be a little more. And this doesn't have to, if there's folks on the phone that are on listening to the podcast that are thinking like, oh my gosh, I hate math. This sounds complicated. It doesn't have to be some 70 line accounting of your time and cost, just at least an approximation that says I'm going to make sure I don't end upside down on a project I say yes to. Everybody in the world who's sold anything has been sorry on the other side of a yes sometimes. We've been like, why did I say yes to this? This is a nightmare for me. It's a horror. Like we're trying to prevent the regret of saying yes to the wrong projects with a
And the
good
key
floor.
is to learn from those oopses.
For sure.
And okay,
For
what am
sure.
I going to do differently next time? Where has my floor perhaps changed that I need to make an
Right.
adjustment?
Right.
Okay, so we've got the
And then
floor in place.
that's the floor. Now, anyone who wants to take it to the next level, maybe there's folks that have already been doing something along those lines and they say, okay, but I don't know where I could go from here. I'll describe the ceiling and then I'll describe the process to find the ceiling. The ceiling is more a measure of what's possible. The floor is like, it's just as it's described, it's a floor, it's the minimum, right? But what people will pay you is rarely limited by the floor, particularly if you are best in class or better in class at your skill. People will pay you more because the value's there. And it's the quality of the product, but also the creativity expressed, the artistry, everything else. Maybe the very personal, sentimental connection they have to, they've commissioned you to do something, but it's
Mhm.
very important to them. Like the value, and that's where it gets a lot squishier. It's where it gets trickier. But I'd encourage folks to at least think about that because the problem with doing pricing based on our time is we get better and faster at things.
Mhm.
So how does it make any sense that the better and faster we get, meaning we're producing higher and higher quality more efficiently, why should we make less for that? My
Because it's
problem with
taking less time. Yeah.
absolutely. That's
Mhm.
my problem with time-based approaches to pricing, unless we're saying, okay, I used to value my time at $25 an hour, and now I'm valuing my time at $50 an hour or $100 an hour or $500. The number itself is less relevant than we have to understand if that's part of our thought process, that we have to have a way to scale that number up as we get better. Even if we do that, what the customer is willing to pay is generally not rooted fundamentally in our cost. If you get halfway through a quilting project and realize you made a mistake, have to rip a bunch of things out and start over, you don't, charge the customer twice, even though you've got twice as much time in it and twice as much material. Cost does not drive price, only value does. So this idea that what they're willing to pay us is somewhere quite north of our minimum, if we're good at communicating and defending it, explaining that value and helping them connect with the value, that they will pay us more than the floor. And my guess is everybody listening to this podcast has had some of those experiences where they were nervous about a number, they said it, and the customer said, okay. Like we've done that where we've exceeded our own expectations. So then the question becomes, how do we get there? So we understand the concept of a ceiling is the maximum that customers will pay us based on value, not the minimum we should accept for our time and cost, but the maximum people will pay us based on value. Then the next question is, okay, how do we figure out where that is? And this is the most unsatisfying answer of all. It's you've got to trial and error. No one knows. I don't know. You don't know. Your customers don't know. Nobody knows exactly what this stuff is worth because it is so subjective. And the only way to figure that out is to try it. So if you've been selling a certain product for $100, I'm totally making up a number here, and you think that I've really been using floor-based methodology to price that, and I think I could maybe see where that could go. I don't know, and you don't know if the ceiling's at 200 or 150 or 300 or
Right.
so the best way to start to figure that out is try it. When you can do that fast, if you want to map out your full pricing power quickly, but it's a risk, or you can map that out slower. You could say, hey, I'm going to go up $10 at a time until I start to see that if I this idea of win rate, which may be a new concept for some folks listening. It's if I go to a craft show and I have 100 people stop by, I sell 40 of these products, these little pillows, whatever it is. Okay, so then your win rate's 40%. You've sold to 40 people out of 100 stopped by. If you raise it by $10 and you're still selling to 40 people out of 100, you haven't found your ceiling.
Right.
If you raise it and 20 and 130 and once you get to some point where all of a sudden, boy, a lot fewer people are buying this, that can give you some indication that you're starting to get closer to the ceiling. Now, I would say if you sell half as many products at twice the price,
It's
you've
a
made
win.
the same money creating half as much work.
Yes.
That might still be a good idea. So I don't overreact to maybe a hit to quote unquote win rate. If you're making enough money by selling fewer but higher priced items, that can be a really satisfying way not to work your fingers to the bone, literally for nothing.
Yes. So agree. So agree. One of the things that you say that we're touching on here is that it's very important to find your own voice. Do you mean your own voice in how you communicate with your clients, customers, or your own voice in your work and what you're producing?
I think both are really important. And particularly when you're creating something a personal expression of your talent and your creativity, the more authentic you are in doing so, that in a way that aligns with your authenticity as an artist, I think that always resonates, right?
You kind of
Any
stand out.
tool,
Your voice can be heard if it's a very distinctive,
for sure.
whatever it is
For
that you do. And I don't mean your physical
versus
voice, but
mimicry. Yeah, versus mimicry. Oh, that artist is making a lot
right,
of money because they're doing a lot of stuff with fairies and whatever. Like either
right.
topically or style wise, we're trying to chase somebody else's style. I don't think that ever works out well or as well as it does to just find our own voice and style in our work. And that's again across industries. That said, mostly when I mention that, I'm actually talking about how we talk about our work with customers, how we communicate our work. And so it's finding our own voice. An example is I talk about how to negotiate pricing more effectively. And some of the advice I give, I've heard from different people over the years, like that thing you just said would be really hard for me to say. I would have a hard time saying those words. And I never, like never should you say something that isn't you. You should not say words that are not you, and you should not channel a style that is not you because you think my brother-in-law is a really good negotiator and I always hear him say this, so I'm going to try to say that. Inauthenticity smells like I say dogs and prospects can smell fear. So if you are trying to act away, it
Mhm,
gives off weird, strange, goofy vibes. And
mhm.
nobody wants to buy from somebody that they feel like is trying to talk them into something or that's smarmy or weird or gross. So if it feels wrong to you, don't do it. Don't do
Great.
it.
Yeah.
That said, I don't think the choices are roll over and get paid nothing for my work or be this like smarmy, weird imitation caricature of myself. So when I advocate, and this is what's behind the advice of finding your own voices, find a way that is authentic to your personality, your values, your style, and your way of speaking or writing that still allows you to respectfully and diplomatically push back against a customer who's trying to underpay you.
Mhm. And
There are
fundamentally, we're back at
yeah,
our knowing where your floor and your ceiling are and having pre-decided where your comfortable price point is. For me anyways, maybe this is just me, but pre-deciding some of these things super helps me. So knowing what my floor is helps me. Also doing things like almost role playing, like practicing the things I'm going to say, practicing graceful no's, for example. I literally
yeah,
do that before the customer walks in the door. I have a list of maybe reasons why I wouldn't accept a project, and I can pull out one and it's gracious and it's not hurtful to them, but still keeps me out of that situation. And likewise, you can practice, or I do, phrases that describe my value or what makes me unique. So, is that a helpful way to approach this kind of mindset? It is a mindset about my comfortability, my belief in my value. I can't convey it if I don't believe it, in other words.
yeah, yeah. There's two really smart things that you're doing that I want to highlight. One is a structure. So you mentioned this, like having pre-decided. If we have rules for ourselves, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to do this under this set of circumstances. That structure can be really helpful when we're in the moment having a conversation with a customer. I think of Dumbo, the elephant with the big ears. He could fly because he had the feather. Like the feather gave him confidence. Now he could always fly. He didn't need the feather. But the feather was a support structure for him to give him the confidence to do this scary thing. And I think of that like the idea of a set of rules, a a set of sort of a swim lane where it's okay, I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to go here. I'm only going to stay inside of this lane, and if I do that, then I know I'm happiest and my customers are happiest. So I'm going to stick inside this rule set
Mhm.
and not use rules as a limiter, but as a supporter
Mhm.
of us getting what we want. And so you're pre-deciding that, to use your words, is to me that structure. It's giving yourself the feather to jump out and fly.
It is. I
Um,
love that swim lane picture because that's how it feels to me. Deciding in the moment is seldom makes the best decisions because I can't think
yes,
of all the factors when I'm under pressure. But if I
that's
think of
right.
all the factors aside and establish the barriers of my swim lane, that
Mhm.
just sets me up for successful communication.
100%. The second thing that you do that is very smart that I would encourage folks listening, take a page out of your book, is this idea of preparing specific things you're going to say or specific ways you
Mhm.
can respond in role playing. Humans. So, first of all, pricing is for most people a relatively fear driven area of our work. If you line up 100 people who sell stuff, I bet you my house, zero of them would say, I love when I get to tell them what it costs. It's not the area of confidence and joy for most people who sell stuff. It's the area of relative discomfort. That means fear is present a lot when we sell. And when we're afraid, the amygdala is in charge. It's fight or flight. It's not good at reasonable, nuanced, profitable decision making, right? It wants out of the pain and the fear. And so it will do like irrational things to make it stop. Why that's relevant to this idea of preparing what you're going to say in role playing. It's so the idea of muscle memory is known to folks, right? If you're a golfer, if you take 10,000 swings, that gets into your muscle memory. There's the same kind of concept in our brain that's called procedural memory. And so why muscle memory works and procedural memory works is it becomes automatic.
Mhm.
We don't need to think as much to put it into practice. And so you don't have to think as much. If you've swung the golf club 10,000 times, you get up and you swing and you don't have to think. Why that's important is if we're under duress, AKA we're in a stressful, scary, quote unquote, fear is present for us as we're having a customer conversation, rather than in that moment, while we're afraid and our amygdala is running the show, try to come up with the right words to say.
Right.
Our brains are not good at that. So,
Right.
what if we had preloaded our brains with some
Mhm.
role playing and create some automaticity around our words such that, like, when that customer comes at us and says, that's a lot more than I thought it was going to be. You do beautiful work, but geez, there's no way I can afford that. If you could do it for X, I'll go with, instead of deciding in that moment,
Right.
what am I going to say if they do that? What if we had practiced ahead of time? What if we had asked ourselves, what are the different kinds of things a customer might say to me? What am I afraid they'll say? What do I hope they don't say? And then practicing the answers to those gives us a lot more ability in the moment to stay present and calm and operate with a little bit of automaticity because we put it into our procedural memory.
I love that word, automaticity. I actually recorded a podcast episode all around it. It's just, I'm going down a rabbit trail here totally.
No, I love
But
it.
what I do is long arm quilting, right? So I hold the handlebars and I guide this 50-pound machine over quilts. And my YouTube show, I talk while I'm doing it. I'm chatting with the audience, and everyone, oh, so many people always comment, how do you quilt and talk at the same time? And this is my answer. But what I'm finding is it follows through in so many areas of my life, and you've just described that procedural memory, something that you learn to do by repeating it, then you don't have to think about doing anymore. And it just
Right.
runs on autopilot in the background.
Right.
So I find that
That's
in
right.
my practical work, but I love seeing that applied to my thought processes too.
Sure. Sure.
So cool.
And it can work. And look, nobody likes role playing. I acknowledge that it's awkward, right? Even if we're doing it by ourselves with the mirror or the dog, but especially if we have another human we're trying to practice with, it's awkward. I can appreciate it's not fun, but I would say it's a little bit like eat your veggies, right? Like you have to, if you don't like this particular food that's really good for you, just suck it up, eat it. You're
It's
going to be
less
healthier
pain than
for it.
being sorry you committed to things of great
Way lower
magnitude.
price than you should have,
Yep,
for
the
sure.
smaller pain.
The pain of saying yes to too low of a price lasts a lot longer than the pain of standing firm in your value for the 2 minutes you're standing in front of the customer.
Yep, and especially if you are a chronic committer, overcommitter to things at a low price, and I know people who do that, and they feel stuck in this paralysis, this rut of, "But I can't ever catch up to get myself out of this place." How this is something I think we quilters, particularly artisans, deal with. How do we start to build the confidence in ourselves to be able to have faith in ourselves and to be able to convey that to someone else? I just don't know how to tell people where to start with that. I feel like I've progressed a fair bit myself, and for me, it has come from contact with other people and hearing
Mhm.
other confident people in other fields. What are your
Sure.
thoughts on that?
I think it's a great question. I'm not sure I have a robust answer to it. I think what you've done has been very helpful. I think that kind of back to that trial and error thing, like the first time you sell something ever, you don't know what people are. And so success, commercial success can start to build confidence that, hey, I've sold 10 of these things. People really like this stuff. And maybe I can sell it for $10 more now so confidence can come from success. It can come
Sure.
from the being around other confident people, seeing how they communicate and talk about their own value. I also think it's really worth spending a little time really in an inquiry about the value that you provide. Another pitfall I see with creatives and artists, people that have a high degree of mastery over their craft, is they tend to discount that mastery because it's easy. Stuff gets very easy once you're an expert at it. It's hard to get there. Like back when you first started long arm quilting, I'm sure you couldn't stare at a camera and record a podcast and also quilt at the same time. Like it's hard when you're new, but once you become a master at something, things get very easy and they get very fast. And it's easy to discount the value of that because it's so simple for us. And so we think to ourselves, why would somebody pay me $1,000 for that? It's no big deal, right? But it's like some customer brings some intricate, specific requests that seem to them like this unsolvable thing. And you look at it in 5 minutes, the right way to do it. The only reason you know how to do that in 5 minutes is you've done it 1,000 times before.
Right.
Don't be tempted to underprice what is valuable to the customer just because it happens to be really easy and fast for you to produce. And so I would encourage folks listening on that have trouble with confidence around their value, lock themselves in a room with no technology and a blank sheet of paper for 1 hour and do not let yourself out until you've filled both sides of that piece of paper with something that you bring to the market that nobody else does. and that you're proud of, and that people have told you over the years that they're really impressed by. Get and so a little bit of an affirmation, if you will. Let me dive into what I know can make a difference with my work, and then use that as an affirmation to build your confidence.
That is so good. So good. It is all too easy for us to just build one day on the day that came before and not ever stop to really take stock. How have we grown? How have we developed? And just like you said, let's attach some value to those things that we've learned and that we're good at and that we bring. Yeah, so
Can
good.
I tell a quick story on that topic?
Absolutely. Love stories.
I don't even know if it's real. It may be an invented story, but I think it's very instructive. The story goes that Pablo Picasso once upon a time was sketching in a plaza. Woman recognized him and asked him if he'd sketch her, and he says he will. And he dashes off a quick sketch. And when she sees it, she's fascinated. She can't believe how well he captured her spirit and her essence. And she asks him if he'll sell her the sketch. He says he will. He quotes a price of 5,000 francs, which was a huge sum of money for that time in history. And she's shocked. In fact, she's outraged. And she says, "But sir, it only took you 5 minutes." And he says, "No, madam, it took me a lifetime." Why I think that's so relevant for your audience is that they've spent a lifetime developing skills and creative expertise that allow them to produce something really beautiful in only X hours. They're not paying you for your time. They're paying you for your brilliance. Your Picasso get paid. So I originally got involved in the work in Guatemala because I am fluent in Spanish, and I was looking for a place and a way to contribute some skills for a nonprofit's benefit. And so initially I had no particular connection with cleft lip and cleft palate repair surgeries, which is the work that I got involved with. But a group that was going from the United States to Guatemala to do this kind of surgical work was looking for a translator, someone that could help translate with local hospital staff, but also with the families of the patients, because these are mostly babies. And thought that sounds like great work. I think I would really like it. I think I could make a difference there. And went a handful of times as a translator for that purpose. And I had a really, just had a, I fell in love with it. I think I'm a mother myself, and I'm comforting these moms, many of them quite young, far from home, far from family
Mhm.
support, who maybe took a 30-hour bus ride to get to the capital where their baby is going away for anesthesia and surgery. Many of them didn't know what anesthesia was. They didn't really understand surgery. So I'm explaining the procedure to them. And it's understandably completely terrifying and completely isolating. And so the doctors or the nurses come and whisk their baby away, and they're left there in tears and sorrow and fear and hope and all kinds of things mixed together. And so it felt to me like a big honor to be able to sit next to those mothers and fathers and hold their hands and tell them it's going to be okay. And I would come and check. I would pop into the OR and get an update, and I would come out and say, "Everything's going great with the surgery. Everything's going." So I fell in love with it as a translator, but then started to see other ways that my business expertise and process expertise could be helpful to the organization. So I started getting involved in volunteer coordination and surgery scheduling and stuff like that. And I go usually twice a year for 1 or 2 weeks. And last year I founded an organization in the United States called Cleft Care International. And because our NGO partner in Guatemala that organizes all the surgeries and finds all the kids and makes sure they get to healthy birth weight through a milk program and all kinds of other services, they did not have a mechanism to raise funds in the United States. And of course, the United States is the biggest philanthropy market in the world, created that organization with the idea of fundraising on behalf of that organization and then channeling funds to help them do more of their work.
That's amazing. It's just the picture in my mind's eye of these young moms, as you said, or young parents who don't speak the language, and what an enormous amount of faith that must take on their part to go to these great lengths to get these babies to the surgical center, not really understanding what it is, in fact, that's going to happen, but just saying, I know I need help. And here's a little lifeline that's being handed to me, and I'm taking it just regardless.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love that you walk them through that process.
Thanks. It's an honor to be part of it.
Well, that was a great chat with Casey Brown. She is an advocate for fearless pricing, and in fact, her brand new book is that same title, Fearless Pricing. If you'd like to get your hands on a copy, I've provided a direct link to the Amazon bookstore in the show notes, so head over there to obtain a copy of Casey's book. It could be life-changing for you. Until next time, friends, may your sorrows be patched and your joys be quilted.